When you finally make the decision to walk away from a narcissist, something sacred happens, not just in the external world, but in the spirit. You reclaim what they never truly had in the first place, your autonomy, your God-given ability to choose, to think, to feel, without manipulation or guilt. You see, the narcissist builds their sense of identity not from within, but from controlling others, controlling you. And the moment you step away, not with rage, but with resolve, their world begins to crumble. For so long they held the strings. They knew which words would make you question yourself, which silence would make you come running, which twisted logic would make you believe you were the one who needed fixing. That control became their comfort, their compass. But it was never love, it was power disguised as affection, dependence masquerading as loyalty. And when you walk away, when you decide that peace is worth more than proximity, you tear down that false kingdom they built in your mind. And friend, that kind of loss terrifies them. They don't fear you leaving because they love you in the way a healthy heart does. No, they fear the silence that comes after you're gone. The silence that tells them you're no longer available to be bent, blamed, or broken. The silence that says, I'm no longer yours to manipulate. That silence screams louder than any argument ever could. What we must understand is this: control is the narcissist's oxygen, and the absence of control feels to them like suffocation. The panic they feel is not about you. It's about what you represent. You represent a mirror they can't crack, a soul they couldn't conquer, a person who now sees clearly. You become a reflection of everything they tried to bury with shame and gaslighting. Your strength exposes their weakness, and when you no longer dance to their rhythm, they're left alone with a song only they can hear, a song built on lies, insecurity, and fear. That fear runs deep, because deep down the narcissist knows that without control they have nothing. Their charm fades, their tactics fail, their mask slips. They lose the ability to define the narrative, to shape how others see them through your reactions. And without that mirror, their identity begins to crack. But here's the beautiful truth. The moment you walked away, you didn't just take your body with you. You took your light, you took your wisdom, you took the grace they mistook for weakness. And in doing so, you revealed a power greater than control, a power that doesn't need to dominate or deceive to feel secure, a power rooted in truth. When you walk away, you don't just exit a toxic situation, you testify to the world that healing is possible. You model what it means to choose freedom over fear, clarity over chaos, and love. Real love over manipulation. That, my friend, is what breaks their hold. So do not look back in regret. Do not wonder if your strength was too loud or your boundaries too firm. Because in truth, your leaving was never the problem. It was the answer. You answered the call to rise, to step out of the shadow, to walk boldly into a life that's not ruled by fear, but led by faith. And in that quiet, steady walk away, you did the one thing they never thought you'd do. You chose yourself. And that, above all else, is what they feared most. There comes a moment, quiet, maybe even trembling at first, when you decide not to give your energy away anymore. Not your peace, not your compassion, not your soul. It's not about anger or revenge. It's about clarity. You begin to see the truth that your love, your empathy, your willingness to understand, it was never truly received, it was consumed. And when you walk away, you cut off the very thing the narcissist needs more than anything else: your emotional energy, your attention, your light. That was their supply. Now, this supply isn't love in the way God designed love to be, selfless, honest, and life-giving. No, to the narcissist, supply is all about feeding their ego, sustaining their false self, keeping their illusions alive. Your reactions, your defenses, your pain, even your joy, it all served as a mirror for them. A mirror that said, I exist, I matter, I'm powerful. But only because you reflected it back. And isn't that something? All this time you thought maybe you weren't enough. Maybe you weren't loving right, speaking right, giving enough grace. But the truth is, you were giving too much to someone who never intended to give back. Someone who saw your goodness not as a gift to cherish, but a resource to extract. Every compliment they fished for, every guilt trip they laid on your heart, every time they drew you back in with just enough charm, it was all to keep the supply coming. But something shifted. Maybe it was a quiet prayer late at night. Maybe it was the way your spirit just couldn't take one more twist of the truth. Maybe it was when you looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the tired eyes looking back. And in that moment, something holy stirred within you. A realization, a whisper. This isn't love. And I don't have to keep feeding what is starving me. And friend, when you walk away, when you stop responding to the bait, stop reacting to the blame, stop explaining yourself over and over again, you cut the line to their source. You become unavailable. And that unavailability, it rattles them because they never expected you to see through the game. They thought you'd always stay plugged in, always giving, always proving, always needing their crumbs of approval, but you didn't. You stopped. And now they're left with nothing to feed on but their own emptiness. It's not just your absence that shakes them, it's your growth. It's the way you stop chasing their validation and start nurturing your own healing. It's the way you laugh again, not because of them, but in spite of them. The way you find stillness in your days, no longer walking on eggshells, no longer anxiously anticipating the next manipulation masked as love. That peace you carry now, it's not just survival, it's evidence. Evidence that they were never your source of joy, never your anchor, never your safe place, and they know it. When you were with them, you gave so freely because that's who you are. And let me tell you something. That was never weakness. That was never foolishness. That was strength. That was beauty. That was love in its purest form. But now, that same love is being redirected back into your life, your purpose, your future. And it's no longer wasted on someone who saw your heart as a tool instead of a treasure. So when the silence comes and the narcissist scrambles to provoke a reaction, to lure you back with sweet words or guilt-laced questions, remember this. Every time you choose not to engage, you're choosing freedom. Every time you guard your peace, you're building a life where love can actually breathe. Every time you refuse to be their supply, you step deeper into your God-given strength because you were never created to be fuel for someone else's ego. You were created to shine. And no one, not even the one who tried to drain you dry, can extinguish that light now. There's a weight the narcissist will do anything to avoid. It's heavier than loneliness, more frightening than rejection, and more paralyzing than your absence. It's the weight of accountability. The truth is, when you finally walk away, you don't just leave the room. You leave them standing alone with everything they've spent a lifetime trying to run from. And that's where the fear truly begins. For so long they used you like a shield. As long as you stayed, as long as you kept giving, kept forgiving, kept doubting yourself and taking the blame, they didn't have to face who they were. They could pretend they were the victim, the misunderstood one, the one who just needed more from you. They built a world where they were always right, always justified, always in control, and you, out of love or hope or simply exhaustion, carried the burden of their wrongs. But now, you've stepped away, and in that step, something profound has shifted. The mirror they once used to reflect a polished image has cracked. Their favorite excuse has walked out the door. The story they've told about you, about themselves, about the relationship, no longer holds up without your cooperation. And that silence, that absence of your defense, becomes deafening. They fear being exposed because exposure means facing the truth. Not the truth you scream, but the truth you live. And it's not always about you going out and telling the world what happened. Sometimes it's just the way your life begins to blossom in peace, the way your smile returns, the way your eyes stop carrying the weight of confusion and second guessing. That alone speaks louder than any confrontation ever could. You see, accountability is not punishment, it's the opportunity to change. But the narcissist doesn't see it that way. They see it as a threat. Because to admit wrongdoing, to acknowledge harm, to say, yes, that was me, would mean letting go of the lies they've held onto for years. And lies can become comfortable, can't they? They can feel like armor, thin, brittle armor, but armor nonetheless. When you left, you took with you the reinforcement that held their version of reality together. And without you, it all begins to crumble. Now they are left to face the one person they cannot deceive, themselves. And they will scramble. They may project, accuse, create new victims, or even try to rewrite the past. They may run from accountability as if it were fire. But you don't have to chase them. You don't have to convince anyone of what you've lived through. The truth has its own power. It doesn't always need to be shouted from rooftops. Sometimes it just needs to be walked out in quiet confidence. And let me tell you something. There is no shame in walking away. There is no guilt in stepping out of a story that asked you to shrink. You were never meant to play the role of scapegoat, peacekeeper, or emotional punching bag. You are meant to live free. And freedom always comes with a cost. Sometimes that cost is letting go of the version of someone you hoped they'd be. Sometimes it's facing the silence and still trusting that peace will come. But always, it's worth it. When you stopped enabling, when you stopped explaining, when you stopped rescuing them from the consequences of their own choices, you didn't become the villain, you became the light. And that light, the kind that exposes lies and illuminates truth, is exactly what this world needs more of. So let the chips fall where they may. Let them twist the story. Let them scramble for control. You just keep standing, keep healing, and keep living in the truth, because the moment you stepped out of their shadow, the darkness lost its grip and the truth at last began to shine. There's something deeply unsettling to a narcissist, something that shakes them more than your anger, more than your silence, more than even your absence. It's your growth, not just that you moved on, but that you grew, that you began to heal, that you found your voice, your clarity, your joy, that you stopped looking back with regret and started walking forward with purpose. Because your growth does more than signal your strength. It tears down the illusion they built of being above you. You see, a narcissist survives by keeping others beneath them. Not always in obvious ways. Sometimes it's subtle, little digs cloaked in concern, small compliments laced with comparison, moments of support that end in sabotage. They need to feel superior, not through their own merit, but by convincing you that you're somehow not enough, that without them you'd fall apart, that they are the reason you're standing. But when you begin to rise without them, when you start to thrive in the very space they said you'd never survive in, it unravels the lie they've told themselves all along. They told you that you were too emotional, and now they see you grounded. They said you were weak, and now you walk in power. They said you were lucky to have them, and now you're living with a joy they never gave you. And that's hard for them to face, not because they miss you, but because it shatters the pedestal they built for themselves by keeping you small. But here's the beauty of growth. It doesn't need to prove anything. It simply happens. Day by day, quietly, steadily, and sometimes in ways even you don't fully recognize, until one morning you wake up and the tears aren't the first thing that greet you. The fear has faded, the fog has lifted, and you realize you're not just surviving anymore, you're becoming. And that, my friend, is what terrifies them. Because your becoming says something loud. They never held the power they thought they did. You were never beneath them. You were never broken. You were never too much. You were just believing a story that wasn't yours. And now you're rewriting it chapter by chapter with strength that came from the fire they tried to burn you with. They may mock your healing. They may pretend they don't see it. They may even try to insert themselves back into your life just to regain some control. But no matter what they do, they cannot unsee the transformation. They cannot deny that you're not who you were when you walked away. You've grown. And that growth now stands as a quiet witness against the illusion they worked so hard to create. There's no need to shout about it. There's no need to convince them or anyone else that you're better now. Growth is its own testimony. People notice it. They see the peace on your face, the strength in your words, the confidence in your step. And most importantly, you feel it in your spirit. You feel it when you no longer need validation to feel valuable, when you no longer apologize for having boundaries, when you finally understand that love doesn't require the sacrifice of your soul. You've come a long way. And maybe there are days it still feels hard. That's okay. Growth isn't about perfection. It's about direction. And you, my friend, are walking in the right one. You're walking toward wholeness, toward truth, toward a life where manipulation no longer has a seat at the table. So keep walking, keep rising, because every step you take away from that false idea of who you were and toward the truth of who you are is a step that breaks the chains of their illusion and replaces it with something far more powerful. The truth of your growth isn't just your healing, it's their undoing. There's a moment that comes after the storm, after the tears, the confusion, the grieving, a moment when you realize that the one who once consumed your thoughts, dictated your emotions, and clouded your days barely crosses your mind anymore. That moment, quiet and almost unnoticeable, carries more power than any confrontation or final word ever could. Because while the narcissists may brace themselves for your rage, for your accusations, for your dramatic exit, they are never prepared for your indifference. You see, anger still feeds them. As twisted as it may sound, even your fury keeps them relevant. It keeps you tied to them. It says you still matter enough to move me. And so they provoke it. They poke, they prod, they push your buttons, not always to win an argument, but to stay on your radar, to linger in your heart, even if it's only as a source of pain. But when the anger fades, when the emotional ties loosen, when they no longer take up space in your soul, that's when the real fear sets in for them. Because now you're no longer looking back, you're not reacting, you're not posting cryptic quotes, writing long texts you'll never send, or rehearsing what you would say if you had the chance. You're not waiting for closure, you've already found it. In your own peace, in your healing, in the stillness they always tried to disrupt. In that stillness, that sacred silence, it speaks volumes. It says, you are no longer the center of my story. And that message, without a single word spoken, hits deeper than any form of retaliation ever could. To the narcissist, irrelevance is like vanishing. It's a death of the role they played in your life. They lose the audience. The stage goes dark, the spotlight fades, and the thing they counted on most, their ability to live rent-free in your heart and mind, is gone. That's when they realize they no longer have access to the emotional energy they once thrived on. And there is no panic quite like that. But don't mistake this shift in you as coldness. It's not bitterness. It's clarity. It's the fruit of hard-won wisdom. It's what happens when you grow so deeply rooted in truth that chaos can no longer pull you out of alignment. And that's not just powerful, it's holy, because there is something sacred about a soul that refuses to be disturbed by the very thing that once wounded it. You didn't become indifferent overnight. It took time, it took grace, it took breaking and rebuilding, but you got there. And now you are living proof that freedom is possible, not just from the relationship, but from the mental and emotional hold it had over you. You've learned that your peace is not up for negotiation, that your worth doesn't require debate, and that your joy is not a gift someone else gets to take away. Let them wonder why you haven't called. Let them question why you no longer engage. Let them scroll through your life in silence, trying to figure out how you moved on without the final scene they scripted, because you don't need a dramatic ending when you've already found a new beginning. So, go on living, go on laughing, go on building the life they said you couldn't have without them, not out of spite, but out of sacred conviction that you were always meant for more than survival. You were meant to thrive, and when they realize that your silence isn't angry, it's peaceful, that your distance isn't punishment, it's healing, that your lack of response isn't a game, it's growth, they'll finally understand what they feared most wasn't your wrath, it was your freedom. There's a strange thing that happens when you finally break free from the grip of a narcissist. At first, they think it's just another game, another phase, another attempt to get their attention, because for so long they've believed that no matter what they did, you'd come back, you'd bend, you'd forgive, you'd explain. And so when you finally walk away for good, truly walk away with no bitterness, no begging, no need for their validation, they don't feel relief. They feel something far more haunting. They feel your absence. But not just your physical absence, it's the absence of your admiration, your softness, your steady belief in their potential, the absence of your unconditional compassion, the very thing they mistook for weakness but now realize was rare strength. And as you grow, as you flourish, as you begin to shine in the fullness of who you are, you become something they cannot replace. You become the one they couldn't destroy, the one who got away, the one who now lives beyond their reach. And that, my friend, is what they never expected. Because a narcissist isn't haunted by the people they discard. They're haunted by the ones who survive them, the ones who rise, the ones who go on to live vibrant, purpose-filled lives without ever turning back. You become, in their mind, the unattainable ideal, the one they mishandled, the one they misunderstood, the one they thought they had all figured out, until you became someone they could no longer access. And here's what's truly remarkable. While they're clinging to the fantasy of who you were, you're no longer bound by it. You've grown, you've healed, you've stopped dimming your light to fit their shadows. You've stopped twisting yourself into someone they'd approve of. And without realizing it, you've become something that both fascinates and frustrates them, a person they cannot control, cannot define, and cannot forget. They may reach out masked in nostalgia or sudden humility. They may try to remind you of the good times, the bond you shared, the memories you once made, not because they've truly changed, but because the fantasy of who you were has become more valuable to them now that it's gone. But you know better. You know that what they miss isn't really you, it's their access to you. And that's a crucial difference. Because what they're longing for is not the real you. They never truly saw that version. What they miss is the version of you that tolerated their chaos, absorbed their blame, and stayed small so they could feel big. That version no longer exists. You've stepped into a new season now, one where your heart is guarded not by fear but by wisdom, one where your love is given with discernment, one where your worth is no longer up for negotiation. And so they're left chasing a memory, a version of you that faded the moment you saw your own value. They look from afar now, trying to figure out how the person they underestimated became the one they can't forget. And in that distance, you become a mirror to them, not of their superiority, but of their loss, of what they mishandled, of what they let slip away. And that ache, it's the one thing they can't manipulate. They can't charm their way out of it. They can't project it onto someone else. It's theirs to sit with. But you You're free. You're not caught in the past. You're not playing old scenes in your mind. You're living. You're growing. You're becoming more of who God designed you to be, full of grace, full of strength, full of truth. And you don't need to prove your worth to anyone who couldn't see it the first time, because when you finally walk away from what tried to break you and you rise into who you were always meant to be, you don't just survive the storm, you become the one they never saw coming. Now, my dear friends, if you've heard anything today, let it be this. You are not who the narcissist said you were. You never were, and you never will be. What you endured, what you survived, what you rose from, those are not marks of weakness. They are the very proof of your strength, your resilience, your divine worth. You walked through a fire that tried to consume you, and you came out refined, not ruined. That's not just recovery, that's redemption. We've seen how the narcissist's greatest fear isn't your anger or even your departure. It's your healing, it's your silence, it's your joy. It's your life no longer revolving around their chaos. It's the fact that they can no longer control the narrative, no longer manipulate your spirit, no longer twist your identity to fit their needs. When you finally walk away, you don't just leave them behind. You leave behind the need to be understood by someone who never had the capacity to see you clearly. Their world starts to crumble when yours begins to blossom. They fear exposure because you now walk in truth. They fear accountability because you no longer shield them from the consequences of their own choices. They fear your growth because it reveals the illusion of their superiority. They fear irrelevance because it screams that your soul has healed past the point of no return, and most of all, they fear that you've become something they can never touch again. Whole, wise, and free. So, don't look back. Don't second guess your freedom. Don't shrink to fit a story that was never written by the author of your life. There's a path ahead of you now, paved in grace, lined with purpose and covered in the fingerprints of a God who never left your side. You are not just a survivor of narcissistic abuse. You are a living testimony that no lie, no manipulation, no darkness can hold back the light of someone who has discovered the truth of their worth. Keep walking in that truth, keep building, keep healing, and let your very life be the answer to every attempt they ever made to break you. Because your freedom is not just your victory, it is the end of their power and the beginning of your promise.